It seems empty, right? I can't just say, be yourself, right? Take that unique distinctness and have it. You don't just have something, right? We don't exist as people to just have something, right? I don't just have a car, I drive a car. I don't just have a MacBook, I use a MacBook, right? I don't just have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? I love my boyfriend or girlfriend, right? No. I use him, no. You came to the first round, you understand why, okay? But you have a car? No, you drive a car. You have a computer? No, you use your computer, right? So I have my unique distinctness. I have the me that is me, given to me by whom? God. Out of what? Love, freely given to me. I have that unique distinctness. I have to do something with it. Right? It doesn't make any sense for me to just have it. I don't just take my unique distinctness and say, good morning, unique distinctness. Today I'm going to put you in this part of the closet. Today you're going to hang out with the coats. Right now. I take that unique distinctness out and I recognize what about me can I share with the world? Right? What about me can I share with the world? What about me do people want to see? So that I can give glory and honor and praise to God. Right? What about my unique distinctness has to be shared with the rest of the world? That's the question we should ask every single morning. Right? And we ask it in the context of prayer. We say, God, who am I? Who am I? You made me to love you. So how am I going to love you? What am I going to do to love you properly? Right? You take that unique distinctness and you figure it out. And how do you figure it out? Well, you do a few things. Okay, but before we get to those few things, I want to tell you a personal story. Okay, I'm a big believer, and my hand gestures are getting ahead of me. Okay, I'm just shaking around. Okay, I'm gonna have a seizure. Let me shake. Back when I was in high school, I know it's hard to believe, but once upon a time I was quiet. Once upon a time I kept to myself. I technically, those of you that have been to see a lot, I am an introvert, like off the charts. Surprise, surprise. But I was kind of a keep to myself kid. I was the smart kid that everybody wanted to cheat on, especially in religion class. When I was in high school here at St. Louis, my nickname was, and I am proud of this and not proud all at the same time, Katie the Catholic kid. Okay, I grew up in a family. Some of you know my parents. My dad was born and raised 2 blocks away from Our Lady Queen of Heaven Church. My mother was born and raised Southern Baptist, and she was raised, and I'm not kidding, to not like Catholics. Okay? Well, Marie and Garland meet and fall in love, right? Garland asks Marie out on a date. Marie says yes. They go out, and Garland very quickly finds out Marie's not Catholic. This isn't going to work, right? So they progress in their relationship, and finally he's like, look, Marie, I want to marry you, but you have to convert. So she did. 6 years later, out comes me. Okay, so my mother converted to the Catholic faith, and if you know any converts, if you know anybody that's converted, you know that they have to freely choose it, right? They have to make the conscious decision to become Catholic. And usually what happens when you make that conscious decision to become Catholic, you grow to love it even more. Okay, so my father was born and raised Catholic. My mother converts. They have a child. Naturally, I'm destined to be a zealot, right? I have no choice. I have to be Catholic, right? It's something. Do you all know what the word zealot means? No. Somebody that's very zealous. Do you know what the word zealous means? No. Excited about their faith, clearly. Okay. So I was born into a super Catholic family. Okay, and I always make the joke. Some kids grow up going to the baseball field. Some kids grow up going to the dance studio. I grew up going to church. I'm not even kidding. Like, that's where our social life was. That was everything that we were. Our family was identified by our Catholic faith. I do not remember a time in my life when I was not in a pew at 5 p.m. in the evening, right? Monday through Sunday, right? Sunday, whatever, okay? All the time, in the church. That was where we were. That's who we were. When I was a sophomore in high school, I woke up one morning, and I don't know what prompted it, why I thought it to myself, but I just thought to myself, you know what? I'm tired of being Catholic. I'm tired of it. It was forced upon me. I'm bored. Mass is always the same. The priests aren't very nice to me, right? I'm sick and tired of this 2,000-year-old tradition. It just bugs me, right? And so that evening, I'm not even kidding, this is how it happened. That evening, my mother calls me down from the living room. She was like, hey, Katie, it's time to go to 5:30 Mass. And I was like, you know what, Mom? I don't think I'm going to. And she just kind of did a double take, and she was like, excuse me? And I said, you know what, I just don't feel like going to Mass today. And she was like, uh-huh. And in like an instant, my mother went from saint to demon. Out came the horns, the claws and the talons were just like emerging from her fingernails. And she looked at me and she was like, oh, well, if you're not going to go eat Jesus with us, then you're not going to eat dinner with us either. Okay. It was a clever joke in my family, but it was quite insulting, actually. But anyway, so while they were at Mass, I made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and of course I had to eat. And proceeded, that continued for like the next 6 months. They would go to Mass every day, I wouldn't. I would continue to go on Sundays for fear that my mother would kick me out of the house and send me to a Catholic rehab center. But I stopped the daily Mass thing, I stopped the evening rosary with my family, I just kind of became a recluse. And here's why. Here's why I was so darn frustrated with the Catholic Church. I thought that all these rules and all these regulations and all these things that Catholicism told me to be was not who I was, right? I didn't get to choose that. What point in my life did my parents ever sit me down and say, you know what, Katie, there are a lot of different faiths. There are a lot of different beliefs about God. You may pick one. They never did that. They never did that. All they ever told me was, you're going to church. It's 5:30 in the evening, and you are going to Mass, and you are going to receive our Lord because that's what you do, because you are my child, right? So that ticked me off. I didn't want that. So I rebelled. I just kind of fought against it, right? I thought that I couldn't be myself in the confines of the Catholic faith because I never got to choose it. Never got to choose it. It was a Tuesday morning that things kind of shifted. I woke up that morning, and I still had the crucifix that had been given to me at my baptism on the wall across from my bed. It's the first thing I see every morning. And I saw it that particular morning, and I distinctly recognized it. And I thought to myself, in that moment, you know what, that crucifix doesn't mean anything to me. It's a couple of sticks with a dead guy on it. And it sounds horrible, because it was. At 16 years old, I hit rock bottom, right? I hated my faith, and I hated the church, and I hated everything that it involved, right? Because it had been forced upon me, or so I thought, all right? That evening, the day that I realized that the cross didn't mean anything to more than the sacrifice of Christ, that the gift of God to me, the greatest gift that's ever been given to the world, didn't mean anything to me. That evening, my mother comes upstairs, and she walks into the church in my room, and she was like, you know, Katie, it's time to go to church. Because she continued to invite me every single day. And I said, you know what, Mom? I just think that I need a break from Jesus. You know, I just don't feel like loving him anymore. And she looked at me, and my family's not very emotional, so crying is usually a pretty big deal. And there were tears in her eyes, and she looked at me, knowing how far I had fallen kind of into this pit of despair. And she said, you know, Katie, if Jesus had decided to take a break and didn't feel like loving you anymore, then Good Friday might not have happened. And she turned around and she walked out of the room. And I could hear her crying as she continued down the stairs. Obviously, I came back to the church. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, or studying theology. But that moment, you know, if Jesus had decided to take a break, then Good Friday might not have ever happened. Was kind of the turning point where I realized, you know, maybe she's right. And I went to a priest, and then I proceeded to have conversations with the academic director here at St. Louis at the time, Deacon Glenn Bayou. He works at McNeese State University now, if any of you've ever encountered him. And they basically began to kind of bring me back to the faith by letting me ask questions, and by coming to understand what it is that we truly believe. Why does Catholicism make sense? And I came to this very distinct realization, okay, and this is also important, right? We are Catholic because it's a gift to us, right? 2,010 years ago, in a manger in Bethlehem, a child was given to us, right? Mary and Joseph said yes to the greatest gift that this world could ever give us, right? And Word made flesh, entered into time and space, and dwelt among us, right? The incarnation happened. Everything in our faith is incarnational, right? It all points back to him. Being Catholic is not about a bunch of rules. It's not about a book. It's not about a pope, right? It's about a person. And his name is Jesus, right? And to be Catholic means that we follow him. We follow him. Now the rules and the regulations and what the Pope says, that comes along with it because he established it, right? You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, right? What you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. What you loose on earth will be loose in heaven, right? My body and my blood, this is what you need to eat, right? Scripture, point by point, all comes back to what we believe as Catholics. So what we teach is part of our Catholic faith, but it ultimately comes to us by way of an individual, by way of a person, by way of a man named Jesus Christ. So to be Catholic To be Catholic means to accept that, to love that, and to be yourself, right? To be yourself, to be the individual that God has made you to be, means that you can identify with Christ. Okay? You can identify with Christ. Some of you have heard this story, so still laugh at the punchline. I was about 17, I was a senior in high school, and 17, 18, and I was babysitting this little girl. Her name is Julia, okay? And Julia, she's adorable, blonde, ringless. She was about 2.5 at the time. And she and I spent the whole day together. It's about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was time for Julia's nap. And she was worn out. We got the putt-putt. We went to go play the big ball pin at McDonald's. We had a blast. She was whipped, but not whipped, but exhausted. And so she brings me back. I bring her back into the house, and she was like, Miss Katie, I gotta show you something. I gotta show you something. So I was like, okay, Julia, let's go. So she grabs my hand, and little kids' hands are the best, by the way. Just so cute. She drags me to the playroom, and she's like, Miss Katie, you gotta see this. And she brings me to this wall, and her mother is one of those artsy-fartsy types that like frames everything that the children draw, even the ugly things. So she grabbed, no, there's no ugly drawing from a child. I have to put that in there. So anyway, so up on the wall, and this regular frame on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, regular size computer paper, was this drawing. It literally looked like somebody had taken a box of markers, pulled all the tops off, and just started drawing, like scribbling all around. I mean, it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. Not a Picasso by any means, it was just crazy. Okay, so she's showing me this drawing, and she's just beaming as she's looking at it. And I have no idea what it is. So I look at her and I was like, Julia, what is it? She looks at me like it was the biggest idiot she'd ever seen. And she was like, Miss Katie, it's Jesus and his friends. It's like, okay. And then, for like a solid minute, and for a 2.5-year-old to speak for a solid minute without coming up for air is pretty impressive, right? She begins to point out all the people, okay? There's this big black strip right down the center of the picture, by the way. So she starts pointing all this out. I mean, John and Joseph and Peter and Paul, and apparently Jesus had a friend named Gus. I mean, she's just going to town pointing all these people out. Jesus was a little red dot up in the corner. Like, I mean, he didn't even matter. As far as she was concerned. So finally she talks for a full minute, like describing what they're doing, and they're playing soccer, and they're just having a blast, and it's Jesus and his friends. And she comes up for air, and I was like, Julia, what? Wait a second, what's the big black stripe? Right answer. And she looks at me again like I'm the biggest idiot she's ever seen. Clearly an educated 17-year-old with nothing. And she was like, it's Jesus' grandma.